Welcome to EdTech Talk, where we dive deep into the dynamic world of educational technology, course design, and feature faculty insights in higher education. I'm your host, Joy Ray, and in this episode, we are joined with Dr. Sharilyn Owens, the Dean of Transformative Learning, and Carmen Canty-Johnson, the Learner Engagement and Strategic Outreach Initiatives Coordinator. Today, we are discussing the science of how people learn. I am sort of a science nerd, so I'm excited to dig into this episode topic. But before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
I'm Sharilyn Owens, uh, Dean for Transformative Learning, as Joy said. I've been in this role for about a year and a half. I was hired at Forsyth Tech in 2011 as the mathematics department chair. My background has always been the mathematics classroom in the context of teaching and learning. My degrees are the teaching and learning space, which is what I get really excited about. I think math is pretty cool, but what's going on inside people's heads as they're trying to learn new things is what I get really excited about.
Thank you. Carmen, what about yourself?
This particular position is pretty nice because it combines several different phases of my educational journey. So I have studied at the graduate level education, curriculum, and teaching, as well as urban and multicultural education. But I also taught in public schools for over a decade and shifted my focus around 2018 to adult learners. And I've been at Forsyth Tech about 5 years now. So it is a culmination of all of these experiences as an effort to ensure that people are served and educated in ways that they value. So
That's great. I love bringing everyone together for these episodes because everyone has so much different backgrounds and knowledge that it's just fantastic to be able to learn from everyone. To prepare for this episode, I shared a few resources with Sharilyn and Carmen, and we'll be sharing them with you as well when this episode's released. But we shared a book titled How People Learn, Achieve the Dreams Teaching and Learning Toolkit, and an article titled The Science of Learning. All of these and a lot of other articles that you could find out there, we are able to kind of extrapolate about 7 different foundations to how people learn. So, Sharilyn, would you like to briefly kind of cover what those 7 foundations are?
Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to say too that the resources that Joy has named, and other resources that we have been actively using for years at Forsyth Tech, our common reads, Quality Matters, certainly, the AQ courses that we've been privileged to be able to take over the past few years. All of this is different ways of presenting research on how people learn. And so none of these organizations, including us, including these 7 foundations, kind of owns research on how people learn. And it is absolutely, I don't know if there's any way to even to exhaust the research on how people learn. And even if we could, tomorrow it will be different because the landscape of learning, and particularly in the 21st century, is continually changing. So I just preface with that. But our kind of the 7 foundations are things that we've highlighted with our work throughout the college. So number 1, learners must have access to content. So learning is always difficult. Access to learning should never be. And that is a quote I first heard from the dean who hired me at Forsyth Tech. Learning is always difficult. Access to learning should never be. And the others, people learn best when they are safe physically, emotionally, and culturally. Number 3, people learn best when new content is relevant. Number 4, people learn best in social settings, social contexts. And number 5, people learn new concepts by building on prior knowledge and experiences. 6, people learn with meaningful assessment and feedback. And lastly, number 7, people learn best when they have some autonomy over their environment. So those are the 7 that we've kind of highlighted in the work of transformative learning.
Thanks, Sharilyn. So, Carmen, let's kind of jump to you. What one of those has stood out to you? And would you kind of dig deep into one of those?
Here at Forsyth Tech, the bulk of my work is focused on adult learners. And the foundational principle that you guys spoke about, the people learn best when they are safe, physically, emotionally, and culturally, speaks to some of the challenges, the complex challenges that adult learners may have, that when addressed, not only helps support them, but supports all the learners in the classroom, right? And on campus, because the needs of our learners extend beyond the classroom itself. There are non-academic needs. There are challenges that are related to their own internal perception of themselves. So within a classroom, if an instructor does something as simple as welcoming mistakes, right? Using the growth mindset, like you're able to learn, you may not know it now, but you are going to learn it. You don't know it yet, right? The power of yet. Something as basic as that can help an adult learner feel comfortable admitting if there's something they don't know, right? Or expect and anticipate mistakes without feeling like that makes them less than, right? So making sure that our learners are wrapped and engaged and enveloped in a safe space is an awesome tool and a wonderful principle that we need to enact in all of the classroom settings and in all of the services that we provide. Right.
I really liked coming here to Forsyth Tech to see the holistic approach that is here and the different things that we offer to our students. I was really impressed when I first started working here. And I think that's a great way that we try to make sure that people feel safe in all those different aspects. Sharilyn, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. And I was just really captivated with how Carmen verbalized her work. And I've worked closely with Carmen for a few years, and I really value that work and how the classroom, the learning space setting really is married to the students' livelihoods and their needs and what they come to the table with, and this idea that Carmen was sharing about being having that safe space. And I was thinking of, just as kind of a funny little story, Carmen and I were in a meeting recently where well, it was an interview, and the person who was being interviewed was an expert in a certain area that I did not share. And so I, was kind of trying to participate as if I knew something about this. And the the expert on the matter said, "Oh, a lot of people make a mistake, or not maybe make a mistake, but a lot of people don't understand that this area and this area are actually two different schools of thought, two different things to study." And then the person was a very polite and gracious. I had made a boo-boo, and had, kind of at the table a good laugh, and I laughed at myself. It wasn't the intention of the person who shared their knowledge, but I thought, what a great example of someone who kind of reframed what I had said in a gracious way so that I could learn a new vocabulary word. And also, I'm confident in this space. I'm not an expert in that area, but I'm confident in myself as a learner. I had said that I had said a thing that was wrong, and it was kind of funny, and we all had a good laugh. I'm thinking, if I were a first generation student, if I were returning to school after 10 or 15 years of, working in industry, or maybe not working, and children at home who are learning very quickly, or if I was returning from the justice system, I might not be as willing to, to laugh at myself. And so that's that safety, even in the learning environment, and that building of trust. So I come from a mathematics learning space background, which traditional math class is not a friendly space. It's, traditionally it's a very fixed mindset. You get it or you don't get it, and those who get it are very few, and they kind of get the attention and move on. Highly isolated. Traditional math classes learning is isolated, and so that so I don't, in a traditional class, maybe that fixed mindset, I'm not willing to open myself up and share what I'm thinking, because it's not a safe place to do that. And very little learning takes place in those spaces. So that trust, building a trust and a sense of safety in the learning space, is key to students and learners being willing to share their thought processes, to share what's happening in here. What am I thinking? What am I seeing? What am I visualizing? In addition to being able to speak what I'm thinking and communicate, that is kind of a little higher on Bloom's taxonomy than actually just thinking about it or writing about it. But having that safe space to do so, that's when we can begin to maybe correct misconceptions that students have in a gracious way.
Yeah, having that safety to allow students to make mistakes and talk through what they're learning is really important for that information to be able to transfer out of working memory and into their long-term memory. All right. And so, Sharilyn, do you want to talk about one of the other pillars, or one of the other foundations?
Well, I sort of touched on that social piece, that social construct, where people learn best when they can, when they're involved with other learners. And so we want to build learning spaces, the most productive and rich learning spaces, where the students have some responsibility for their learning. There might be some resistance from students in this area. They sometimes students say, I learn best if I'm lectured to. Well, they might prefer being lectured to, because that doesn't require much thinking on the student part. But when students are working together, working in groups, sharing their thinking, checking their thinking against or with their other learners, with the expert as kind of a facilitator, so that they can kind of correct and guide if conversations are kind of going rogue, or off, that they're kind of off base on the new material, the new concepts. So that social piece really elevates how students can think and express what they're learning. I'm thinking about, like for me, I love to read, and I can read a book and gain information from the book. Of course, it's a bit social because someone had to write that book. And so, I could consider that social because I am taking in the words that someone else put on paper. If the three of us, or if I were given an assignment, so Carmen gives me an assignment to summarize chapter 1 or compare and contrast, or some kind of writing assignment about what I'm reading. Now I have to really think about that. And, that again is a bit of a higher level on Bloom's taxonomy. But now if the three of us get together with some of our friends and discuss the book, now we bring with us all of our experiences, which as adults, we have, a wealth of complex experiences to bring to the table. And Carmen will share something I didn't see because I have a different experience. Joy will bring something to the group that I didn't see. So that's why that social piece is so important as well. If we have that kind of authoritarian teacher as holder of knowledge, and students are just there to like absorb that kind of transfer of knowledge, it's not authentic, it's not interesting, and it's not very productive.
I agree with the ideas that Dr. Owens has just shared, and I think it connects back to a part of what you mentioned earlier, which talked about building trust, which to me is a part of the learning environment anyway. Curriculum is not just what's written, it's a living entity that takes place within each learning setting. So one year, it may be a little different than next year because you have different students. There are different individuals involved as you are making this curriculum as you go, right? So there are relationships that are built in there. And with an instructor who is focused on building those relationships that utilize student engagement, that's asset-based, and is looking at their students as knowers as well, not as them as the sole person with knowledge, but recognizing the students are coming in with information that may need to be adjusted, but they're coming in with something, and utilizing that prior knowledge or prior expertise within like group settings, whether it's think, pair, share, or problem-based learning type of activities, is essential. Because actually in real life, that's how we learn. We learned in social context. It has to be something that makes sense to us. And doing it in that way within a classroom, it's beneficial for all learners, whether they're traditional students or adult learners, because my favorite stories are from my 45, 50-year-old adult learners talking about an 18-year-old and a 24-year-old that they're in the group with. And they're like, I couldn't believe that she knew that. I was like, it's everybody brings something. Like you said, like there are different perspectives and different things that you can learn from people who may not look like you, who may not share all those same characteristics, right? So that a social context, learning in a social context is something that's beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. Everyone brings a different wealth of knowledge, and being able to share that all together is great.
Another foundational principle that you guys mentioned was the idea that people learn new concepts by building on prior knowledge and experiences. And I think that is vital, especially for adult learners who have lived experiences, work experience, perhaps military experience that they are bringing into the classroom. Instructors who utilize the knowledge that students bring with them enrich the experience for everyone. It is beneficial for the learner as well as for the instructor, because they also can gain new insight or information from their students. It would also help adult learners feel safe in the idea that they are not being viewed as lesser than, they are seen as an equal contributor to the learning environment. So I really enjoyed reading that particular one, saying that you need to use the prior knowledge and experiences of your learners.
I think that's an important concept because I know it it's difficult to be able to do that in an educational setting because you like to plan. Planning is a key important part of teaching and being able to have an idea of how you want to present things and how you think it would best go over with students. But being able to pivot is also an extremely important part of that, to know like maybe this activity is not working for these students. It worked last semester, but for these students, I need to try something else. And I need to try to get them to do something else. And being able to pivot and see those signs and being able to work with the students that are in your in your course at that given moment is an important part of teaching.
Just a quick comment. I think that the ability to pivot um, is a skill that is acquired over the course of your life cycle as an educator. So my first year teaching, I had things planned out to the detail. They're going to say this when I ask this question. And then, right, you have to be confident and familiar with your content and comfortable enough to let go of
Mhm.
what's going to happen. And that comes after you've taught that content for long enough to be like, you know what, let's see what happens if we let the students take ownership of this, right? So some instructors may be a little more hesitant. A little hesitant to let go, but they can do it step by step, maybe with one activity, and see what occurs when students are allowed to take ownership of a particular project or the direction of a discussion that's taking place, you know?
100% agree. You've heard that saying, like it's one thing to know the content, but it's another to teach it, right? Because each student has different prior knowledge that you need to be able to grow on and help expand to understand that new content. So it takes that time to be able to know that, and the experiences that you gain with each new class helps teach you how to better support different learners in the different situations.
I think this is a nice segue into talking about formative assessments, with that ability to pivot and to take in what is happening in my learning space, and then help direct that towards the concepts that we need to learn, the student learning outcomes. So, I think formative assessment has a lot of ways to we can utilize formative assessments in many ways. Um, so for example, it could be used as like these low stakes knowledge checks. Okay, like a really good example of that would be a short multiple choice quiz to start or matching quiz or something to start a class session with if you are meeting synchronously. It could be those, auto graded um kind of there's one right answer kind of canned response that we use from our third party publishers and stuff. And those are useful. That is a great way for students to do a very quick knowledge check, to know if they're on the right track. Do they need to, go back and read some more notes or get some more examples or reach out for help? Maybe tap into our amazing tutoring center at the Academic Success Center. Um, those are useful. They're also canned, and they're predetermined. There's a predetermined correct answer, and that doesn't really honor this idea that people bring different experiences to the table. So some authentic formative assessments might be what are giving students opportunity to discuss, and maybe it isn't a discussion board. If we have an asynchronous class, I try to have it smaller groups so students don't get overwhelmed, but they do have a way to connect socially with their peers. But maybe, in a safe environment, students are willing to share what they're thinking and to share their knowledge. And this provides an opportunity also for formative assessments. Now I can see, okay, what are my students thinking? Back to the beginning of my introduction, like what's going on in here is what's really interesting to me. And so if students are safe and feel like they can share that, now we can see, well, how closely aligned is that with the content that we're learning? Do we need to do some redirecting? It informs the facilitator, gives them information about now how could we redirect the student thinking. Using formative assessments and to pivot is one thing that gave me pause when we started thinking about having a uniform template and working in an 8-week semester. Two things that I'm a champion of now. But it gave me pause before because I was bringing a 20th century mindset into a 21st century classroom. But formative assessment is still very important, and providing some intervention, maybe some more problems to solve, maybe a short YouTube lecture, some examples, maybe bringing in some different material. Those things don't have to happen when my students are sitting in front of me in my classroom, which was the kind of 20th century approach to that. So we, if I can be creative and still use those formative assessments to pivot, to bring in intervening materials so students can continue learning, and I can, within reason, kind of keep up with the pace of content that that is outlined with whatever the departmental uniform design is. So formative assessments can take on a variety of approaches. That authentic piece is where some really powerful learning and sharing can take place.
I agree with that. I feel like it connects to some things that we mentioned earlier, talking about learning takes place in social context, that the formative assessment can start off independently and then students share with a small group what they were thinking and then share out, right? I was reading some of the research that we're going to be sharing out after this podcast, and it mentioned that the types of assessments or the types of activities that you use the ones that are best suited may depend on the topic or the subject that you're teaching, the content matter, right? And I was like, that's actually a really good idea. That's a good point to make, that in the way I teach automotive mechanics and do some kind of project-based learning or think, pair, share is going to look different than in a literature course,
Yes.
right? But the benefit of it is still the same. Like, you want to ensure that they still have those opportunities to learn from each other. I am a fan of a good graphic organizer, right? Love a concept map, love some little circles with arrows connecting. And it took me a while to stop providing the concept map for them to write in, to cutting the concept map apart and letting the learners organize the ideas in ways that they saw them related, right? To even shifting to a digital version on like Mural or Mural.com, where there's a whiteboard and students can also do it digitally. So if you're in a hybrid classroom, that way your students who are remote and the students in the classroom have a way to participate in the activity. And I think that as we continue to grow and evolve as educators, that these activities will also be able to capture our learners' knowledge while allowing them to learn with each other and benefit from the knowledge of those around them.
Yeah, there are so many different types of activities out there and different ways to organize and think about content, and those are all going to be different based on the content that they're learning. what I also like about this foundation that we're talking about is specifically the feedback and making sure that we provide the feedback based on that information. Because if we do these types of assessments, we need to make sure that the students are understanding and getting that feedback that of if they're on the right track, or why might there be a disconnect, or how did that certain assessment was incorrect because of some sort of understanding, and being able to bring it around to explain. And I think that goes back into the pivoting thing, right? Maybe we don't have to pivot during that lecture or during that specific lesson, and maybe we don't need to pivot in front of everyone, but we can provide that feedback and an alternative resource for one particular student based on some misconception they might have had. Um, and be able to provide that in an announcement or in a message directed to that student, or in a group message that's just like, here's another way to look at this concept that might have been challenging. And as you do that, you gain all those resources to be able to pivot in different ways.
You know, when you spoke about the feedback, again, I work mostly with students. Um, and I send instructors to the CTLE, right? But you guys did a lot of work with when you were doing the new template and restructuring some of the courses, where there was intentional focus on ensuring that the outcomes, the learning objectives, were matching the activities and the work that's taking place throughout the course, right? And in that process, there were lots of rubrics honed and created. And I have spoken with students who they come with the rubric. I got this project. This is what it's got to look like, right? And the rubric itself is an awesome tool, because I'll be like, where do you see your project right now on this rubric? Are you at a level 2? Okay. Where do you want to be? A level 3? Where can you get those extra points? You know what I mean? Where can you start to improve? And it helps students understand even better when an instructor tells them, this is, this is, I see the growth in your work. If you do this and this, like pulling it from the rubric, that feedback helps them grow as a learner, because then they're like, okay, last time I didn't really focus on my grammar. Let me make sure that I am using the correct verb tense, so that I'm making my sentences simple, so that they're not over, too long or whatever. And I love to see it. I love to see students being able to get that feedback. Like, it's great to get a good job, but I want you to tell me, what did I get right and where can I grow? Right? What else can I do a little bit better? And that type of feedback is invaluable to our students.
And I really appreciate, Carmen, you encouraging your students with that metacognition, right? Thinking about their own thinking, and the rubric is a great tool for them to be able to do that, because they're able to see, and how can this be a little bit better, which also promotes that growth mindset. And it also, that your point there about the rubric and the project also lends itself to the kinds of formal assessments that we offer, and the levels of questioning that we provide for students. If we think about that, if we think about Bloom's taxonomy, which I referenced, we probably should add that to the list of resources there, Joy. But think about Bloom's taxonomy, of that very bottom layer, the foundational level, and just kind of knowledge and skill, which is important. But if I only ask questions there, and sometimes that's, with the auto-generated or like published content, that's the only level we can offer, because there is one canned correct answer, and that's bottom of Bloom's, which is fine, because we need that knowledge, that skill foundation in order to build on that. But if we stop there, we're telling students we don't expect them to think higher. We don't expect them to think critically and deeply. And I'm thinking about an example which can be used. This can be an assessment tool. If I have students in a synchronous setting, if I say, well, solve this equation, x squared equals 9, then maybe I just prompt by saying, well, what's the square root of 9? That question's flawed in the first place. My math friends will remind us that the square root is only the positive one, and there are 2 numbers that we could square to get 9. But if I'm prompting at that low level, and then a student responds, it could be 3 or it could be -3. That's correct. And then we move on. That's not asking students to do much deep thinking. And really only the few students who thought about 3 and -3 were correct, and the rest of them, left behind. Or even if someone said 3, that leaves out one of the answers. So, but what I could do is present this equation, x squared equals 9. Set students in small groups where that's safe. It's safe in a small group, and you cannot hide in a small group. In a group of 30, I can just sit back here and nobody's going to call on me or notice. But maybe I ask, can you think about can you draw a picture of what this looks like? What is this function? Y equals x squared. What does it look like? And who cares? Why would I want to know this? Is there a story that you can make up in your group that would go along with this particular question? Doesn't have to be that question, but asking students to think about, can you come up with something where a scenario that addresses this learning concept? And now students are digging deep, and they're talking with each other and sharing their thinking and bringing their experience and context in this situation, which can be used for assessment, because they're spilling their thinking. And then I also, as the facilitator, I'm privy to their thinking. If I'm counting on the auto-graded thing, which is very handy, I'm not against it. It can't be all that we do, because I'm not now as the facilitator, really getting into what they're thinking.
A part of what you touched on when you mentioned asking the students why this would be relevant to them, or how would this possibly be seen in their potential career or in real life. That speaks to the need for instructors to make sure that they connect the content with the students. Like, it has to be relevant. There has to be a reason why I'm learning this, right? There needs to be something. Not only should it connect to my prior learning or what I'm bringing into the class, there's a reason why I'm developing this deeper knowledge. There's a benefit to me, especially for adult learners, when I go into the workforce, as to why this is going to be of value to me and is going to manifest in a way that helps me upskill. It helps me do another type of job. It prepares me for what I'm working toward, right? So we want to make sure that what we're doing in the classroom settings, in the learning environments, is going to connect or have some type of relevance to what our learners are going to be entering as it relates to employees or business owners,
I think doing that really helps engage the student to know and understand the importance of what they're learning, and it helps them focus, and it helps them be able to transfer that into their long-term memory. All right. Well, this has been a fabulous discussion. Is there anything else that you guys want to add that you would like to do a quick takeaway for our listeners?
I would like to do a shout out to our Academic Success Center, which I referenced earlier. Lucius Oliver, the director, has started something new this fall, which is facilitated study groups. And this is based on that social context, the safe space, relevance, students doing the thinking and the sharing. There is a study from Yuri Treisman at UC Berkeley years ago. I should be more fresh on this study, but you can look it up if you're interested. But the students who were coming to to UC Berkeley, Calculus 1 was the gateway course. It was the gen ed math course. And Black students were not passing Calculus 1. And since it was the gen ed requirement, not only were they not passing Calculus 1, it wasn't just a matter of, oh, I'm going to choose a different career, which we also don't want, but they were having to drop out of college because they couldn't pass the class. And so this really created a social crisis. Particularly of note, the Asian students in the very same class were doing very well. And so, all this social implications came in. Maybe they weren't motivated, kind of the some generalizations and false assumptions. But these were students who were leaders in their community, valedictorians, leaders at church, team captains, and struggling with that, with getting through Calculus 1. And so Yuri Treisman noticed that the Asian students who were doing very well kind of were naturally, culturally, let's get together and study. So social, their social life and their study life kind of intermingled. Let's get together after class. Let's meet at Starbucks. Let's get to the library and hash this out among us. And so they, that training, that does take some training, especially in math class. Probably it's not normal and natural, to want to get together and talk about Calculus 1. Particularly if I have not felt safe in class, if my thinking has been laughed at or dismissed. I didn't have the only one right correct answer. And so that took some training and cultivation to help Black students in this setting learn to work together in a study group. And ultimately, they certainly increased their pass rate. And in fact, if I remember correctly from the study, began to as a group surpass their the Asian and white their counterparts. So this is something that taking these foundations for learning and applying it in the tutoring center, in the academic success center as well, helping students know how to help themselves learn outside of the formal learning space is so important as well.
Carmen, what would you like to close with?
I'd like to say that what Lucius is doing in the Academic Success Center is he's setting a precedent in a way that relates to making sure that our community college students are able to successfully complete their programs. And as it relates to adult learners whom we know have very complicated lives and have a lot of demands on their time and their energy, that we can continue to try to develop ways to help them learn skills and strategies to make them better learners, right? So I think that the facilitated study groups is awesome. And I love seeing how the students show up. I love the writing lab and the STEM lab. I'm wondering how we as an institution can begin to offer other evidence-based strategies to our students who may be remote, right? Who may have availability after 7 p.m. How can they get with other students who also work, until 7 and can only do a study group at 8? Trying to make it something that is proactively provided for students so that it's not just resting on their shoulders alone, right? So I am always happy to speak with faculty who are experts in their content area and are implementing the different inclusive strategies and active learning strategies. And I work on the other side, which is the student success services, where we are teaching students how to be better learners. So I'm hoping that we will begin to work together and learn from each other. So if it works here, maybe it can work in this scenario as well, and begin to create a platform or a place where students can learn content as well as life lessons and institutional insight so that when they leave us, when they've completed their journey, they are now fully equipped to enter the workforce, fully equipped to be functional members of society, right? So I think that we definitely have things that we can grow on, but we have a lot of promise. It's a place of promise. Look at that.
Slunkin.
Look at there.
I think that was scripted. I don't know. Well, thank you guys so much. I loved bringing both sides into it in terms of how we are trying to get instructors to understand and implement these strategies that we're talking through podcasts and different things and things that they read on their own and everything, as well as getting students to understand and take ownership of their learning. And it all comes together. And this is how Forsyth Tech becomes so great, is because we're looking at all these sides and we are trying to help everyone just learn and grow, because that's all what we're here for, right? We're all willing to learn and grow, which is amazing. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of EdTech Talk. Tune in next time for more insights, discussions, and inspirations in the world of higher education. Until then, keep on leading and learning. Thank you.